Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. We're so glad that you could join with us today as we talk about different ways that you can be a good steward with everything that the Lord has trusted you to manage. I hope you're a partner of the ministry. If not, for just $132 a year, you can partner with us and learn how to invest in a biblically responsible way and to be encouraged to be a joyful, generous giver. Speaking of joyful and generous givers, this is the last month of our fiscal year, and we would encourage you to become a partner or consider becoming a monthly soldier, someone who is committed to supporting this ministry every single month. If you do so, we will send you a special gift this month. It is a brochure or education piece of a lot of out-of-the-box thinking kind of ways that you can incorporate into your estate planning and your planned giving. So we hope that you'll consider that, pray about that today. On the show today, we're going to talk about, what happens, what can you do if you have to spend your emergency fund. We're also going to get to some of your questions. So if you have questions, if you don't get to call in on the days that we are live, then we would encourage you to use the Ask Shana feature on the website. Just go to financialissues.org and then you can submit your question there, whether you are a partner or not. So even if you're a little bit shy, go there and submit your question. We're happy to talk about those financial issues. Our stewardship verse today comes from Psalm 9:10. And those who know your name put their trust in you, for you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Well, how do we come to know the name of the Lord? Well, usually we find ourselves looking for God when we get to the end of ourselves. So when we end up in a pit, that's when we tend to look up. And God, in his mercy, allows us to try things our way. They even write songs about it. I did it my way. Because it's not usually until we get to that rock bottom that we actually look up. Seth, do you want to weigh in?
I would love to, Shana. Yeah, it's such a good reminder across the scriptures that God does not forsake his people. He simply cannot do that. He would not go against the very nature of who he is, and God simply does not forsake his people. So that's a great promise for us. I hope we can remember that, especially as we walk through hardship, Shana. I know this is easier said than done. So if you're in the midst of a hard time there, just know that God does not forsake you. And, Shana, speaking of hardships that many of us do go through, a lot of us go through financial hardships. And so that leads to our topic of the day today. What if we find ourselves in a situation where we have to spend our emergency fund? Now, I get for some of us, it may look different than others. But for many of us, if we're trying to get that emergency fund built up and then we face a life situation, a crisis where we have to spend it, that could be really tough. Sometimes things happen that are outside of our control. We've done a good job managing our money wisely, but things still happen. Just to begin, Shana, I saw a recent article I'd love to get your take on from Forbes saying many Americans are ill-prepared for financial disaster. So this is not a rare thing. This is pretty common here. 75% of consumers say they're very or slightly stressed about being prepared for financial emergency. 38% said that they have between $1,000 and $2,000 saved for emergencies, while an additional 18% say they have no emergency savings at all. 37% say they're somewhat or very uncomfortable with their current level of emergency savings, and then 34% of survey participants said they couldn't cover an emergency expense of $1,000 without taking on debt. That's a lot of people. So just to start off, Shana, what is a good emergency fund amount, and why is it vital that we have this adequate emergency fund?
Well, it's important to have this emergency fund to, number one, avoid going into debt if you can, if you have an emergency like that. And, number two, to avoid having to cash out of any of your investments. So that's why this is the first step in establishing this emergency fund before you start to try investing, because, returns are up sometimes, they're down sometimes. And if you have an emergency, you never know if it's going to be when the value is up or down. And you really don't want to have to cash out or be forced to sell when your investments are down. So it really depends. The amount of money you need in emergency savings really depends on where you are in your investor life cycle and, what your needs might be. So, are you married? Do you have a family? Are you single? You might have to have, less. Do you own a house? Do you rent? What are your fixed expenses? So, this is kind of a wide range here, but anywhere from 3 months to 12 months worth of your monthly expenses is good to set aside in an emergency fund. So it also depends on what kind of job you have. Do you have a job? Do you work in healthcare where there's lots of jobs available? Or do you do something are you a rocket scientist? Where there's fewer maybe job openings, or, job opportunities that would be very comparable to the one that you're leaving. So depends on, how long you think it would take to replace that income. And then you have to think about, why do you need an emergency fund? What might you spend those things on? Well, what if you have a car accident? What if you to save money on your premium, what if you chose $1,000 deductible and, the accident was your fault. Now you're looking to spend $1,000 to get your vehicle fixed. What if it's an appliance goes out at home? Can't live very long without a refrigerator, or can't live more than a day or so in my house without a washer or dryer. So you have to, think about those kind of things. What if you have a home repair? What if you live on the coast like I do and a hurricane comes and you have to put a new roof on your house or things like that? So you want to think about all of those things that might come up and use that information as you're trying to decide how much is a adequate emergency savings account for you.
Yeah, that's good, Shana. So let's say, just for example, one or multiple of these things happens, God forbid, but it can happen, and we're forced to deplete that emergency savings to remedy or at least just begin the process of fixing this issue. How do we come back from this? So we've had to deplete it. What do we do next?
Well, I would say it would be similar to the way that you built up your savings account in the first place. So, if you're saving, if you're investing already, maybe you want to make some adjustments to that. I would caution you to not stop in your investing altogether, but, if you had been putting $100 a month away and you'd been investing $90 and putting $10 in your savings account, maybe you flip-flop that. Maybe you redirect more of the money into savings until that emergency fund is replenished. But don't stop the discipline of investing altogether. Stay in that rhythm and then flip-flop them back when you get the opportunity.
Yeah, good. And what other things should we consider if we find ourselves in a situation like this?
Well, we're called to be grateful and to thank God no matter what situation we find ourselves in. So we can thank God, first of all, that He gave us the wisdom to save those funds and that we had the funds to meet the need in that emergency. We can do our best not to go into debt, but if we have to go into debt, we want to try to pay it off as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's good. And then speaking of debt, Shana, last question here. What if we do have the choice before us of using debt in a situation like this? Should we do so, or are there better ways to try to get the money, pick up a second income, for example, seek help from family? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I would say debt is the option of last resort. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Sure. But it really depends on your relationship with your friends and family. I personally would want to avoid doing that. I would hate it if circumstances hindered my ability to pay back my friend or family, and it really put them in a worse position. So, taking on another job or looking for opportunities to sell things that you don't really need. I see people selling stuff on Facebook all the time. So, I, for one, can say that there's a lot of stuff hanging around my house that I don't need at all. And lots of times you can maybe recoup some of that money by doing some of those things.
Yeah. It even brings to mind, Shana, we talk about living within your means. If you're in a situation like this and you still pay for a Netflix account, might be time to cut that out and get that extra, a little, just a little bit of extra helps. It
also help your spiritual life too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And Shana, it reminded me too, you've mentioned the different buckets of money. Just a good reminder that this emergency saving is different from that investing. But I love what you said, how even if we're in a situation like this, if we can help it, to not stop the discipline of still investing. That's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hear the music. That means we got to take a break. Don't go anywhere, though. We're going to come back after the break. We're going to get to lots of your questions that you've sent in. So stick around. We'll be back right after this break.
One of the emphases of preborn has been ultrasound in two ways. An ultrasound machine if a pregnancy clinic doesn't have one, and then an ultrasound session, which we underwrite hundreds of thousands of those. We've seen over and over again the dramatic results that when a woman encounters her baby for the first time and hears that heartbeat, she realizes the magnitude of what's happening here, that there is somebody else, that's her baby. So this is why preborn pushes out ultrasound as much as we possibly can. Preborn has seen over 200,000 babies saved, over 59,000 people come to Christ, populating earth and eternity, life for this life and life forever. Save the baby's life, but save the mother's life so that she can lead that baby to Christ. If we're bringing people into this world and the mother doesn't receive Christ and the child is born and the child lives its life and doesn't receive Christ, this is not a good end. And so we have to have the gospel as part and parcel and really the heartbeat of what preborn is.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Welcome back, everybody. Financial Issues. Shana, as you said, we have a lot of questions to get to here, so I'd love to get this started here. Let's do it. We've got Karen, age 66, is saying, I'm in the 65 and up allocation model, and my CS area is overweighted by about 1.5%. So I have 5 stocks. I bought all at 1% of portfolio. I'm overweighted due to several CS65, CS24, doing well, but not above the 3% level. My other stocks, CS25, CS58, and CS84, are neutral or negative. Do I sell one of these stocks to get closer to allocation level for consumer staples? I thought about selling CS25, praying CS58 and CS84 would eventually turn positive. And then should I take profit on CS65 and 24? What do you think?
Good question. So the thing that I key in on here is he says she's overweight by 1.5% in staples. 1.5%, I wouldn't even consider that being overweight. Unless you're more than, I would say, and it depends on what the weighting is. If the weighting is only 3% and you're at 10%, then you need to pare back, because what will happen, you'll have some normal drift in any portfolio. And what I mean by that is that, the market fluctuates and stocks in your portfolio fluctuate as well. Sometimes some do better than others, but, it sounds like you've got 4 different stocks in that one sector. I think that's plenty of stocks. I don't think that you necessarily need to sell any of them. And what I would say, there's one on there that I know has recently dropped a good bit. So by the time that we've answered this question, you're 1.5% overweight maybe resolved at this point. So 1.5% is not really considered overweight. At that point, I would just hang on and let them ride.
Very good, Shana. Laverne is up next, 64 years old. Laverne said, I have heard you speak about converting a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. You speak about doing this while one is in the lower tax brackets, but what about if you're in a higher tax bracket? Does it make sense to transfer money or assets from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, being 64 years old with a 5-year waiting period? My thought was that if I may be better to pay the tax and move it out of the qualified account, or rather, I may be better to pay the tax and move it out. What are your thoughts on that, Shana?
Yeah, so both traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs are what we consider qualified accounts. A qualified account is one that qualifies for special tax treatment because the government says so. So the IRA, typically you're putting pre-tax money in, so you're getting a tax break today, but you're going to have to pay taxes not only on that money, but everything that it's earned at some point in the future whenever you pull it out. With a Roth account, as long as the government doesn't change any of the rules, you get to grow that money tax-free. So, I don't know what your overall picture looks like, but if your only account is a traditional IRA, I would certainly look at moving, depending on what tax bracket you're in, considering moving money out to either a Roth or just a regular non-qualified type of account. I think the Roth account right now has the best tax advantages that there are. So yes, there is a 5-year waiting period so that your distributions become qualified. It doesn't mean that you can't get any of the money out. You can always get out what you put into a Roth with no taxes or penalty. But it's just the earnings portion that you're looking for that tax-free growth on. So, even if, let's see, she's 64, even if you're going to be retired and start drawing income off your portfolio, I would suggest that you could take money, the income from your traditional IRA. So you want to consider both of those things for how much income you're going to need from your traditional IRA, added to the amount that you're considering converting when you're trying to figure out how to stay in a certain tax bracket. So yes, I would still consider doing it if you don't have one, a Roth account already, because, these types of accounts were created by the government. They exist because the government says so. So the government can change the rules on them whenever they want. Most of the time, they will grandfather in what's already happened. Doesn't mean that they have to, but, I would say it's a good thing to have some money in a Roth.
Awesome, Shana. That's good. Richard is up next here. I think Richard's seeking some help here. He says, I haven't checked for a while on my portfolio tracker, and I realize nothing close to what my portfolio looks like right now. Everything I see doesn't give much weight to cash based on some of the alerts we've been seeing in the last couple of months. I sold much of my stocks. I wanted to update the tracker, but there isn't anything in the allocations that really comes close to my needs. He's just wondering what's up with these allocations for retired folks. What should Richard do here, Shana?
Yeah. So just hang in there, Richard. We did take most things off of the buy list. We still had left all of the fixed income options on there. So I would really look at your portfolio tracker. If there's something that you need in one of those sectors, go ahead and get that filled out. But don't hesitate just to wait a little bit. In the last few weeks, we have continued cautiously adding some things to the buy list, but all of the sell alerts were pretty intentional to get you to increase your cash. Now, this is not a long-term change to the asset allocation model, so we haven't changed the cash allocations. But I would just say that if you're looking at your tracker and you're heavier in cash right now, don't fret about it. Most likely, your cash position is still yielding somewhere close to 5%. So that's not a bad place to be as you're repositioning some things. So it's a little bit more difficult to find things that check all the boxes on our criteria for the buy list at this given time. But I wouldn't let that frustrate you or discourage you in any way. Just, continue. If you're looking to add to your portfolio, I would say just get in the habit of looking once a week. This week is a short week. We'll be delayed a little bit. It'll be Wednesday late in the day before we get the commentary and changes to the buy list posted. But typically that happens on Mondays.
Awesome, Shana. Next one up here is David. David is asking about MA40 on the sell list recently. There's a spinoff company, and he's wondering if that spinoff should also be liquidated.
No, there is, sometimes it takes some time for biblically irresponsible activity to show up as a violation on our screening tool. But so far, that one is still screening clean. It is on our broad list. We know that partners do own it, so it's one that we watch. It's not on the buy list right now. It's not on the sell list, so it's a hold.
Yep. Awesome, Shana. Next one up here is, Lawrence is up here. Lawrence sold out of all his stocks that are over 4 or 5% of his portfolio. He also sold out of UT35. Now, before he was told that if we're in an income portfolio, we don't care whether the stock price goes up or down. UT35 was down, but it pays 8% dividends per year. And there's nothing else that I have, he says, that pays more than that. My income is dividends plus Social Security. Is UT35 unstable? Going to quit paying dividends? You were saying they may be bought by another company. Is that company not biblically responsible? He said, I'm holding off selling any till I hear from you. And he's just wondering some insight that you might have for him, Shana, for Lawrence. Doesn't mention his age.
Okay, so that particular company is, I believe it's still going to continue trading under the same symbol, but the controlling interest, BlackRock is going to own and control more than about 60% of the stock. So, not a fan of BlackRock. There's a lot of things to be said about BlackRock, and so that's just one that we decided we didn't want to be a part of.
Yep. Good call. Gina is up next here, Shana. Gina is already at 38% in cash. She's wondering, should I trim down my portfolio accordingly to the recent sells? And she's 57.
So I would say that you should always follow the sell alerts, no matter, where you are, because once a company comes onto our sell list, it goes off the broad list. That means that we don't track it regularly. So once we tell you to sell it once, don't expect us to put out another sell alert, because we're going to assume that nobody owns it and we're not necessarily following it anymore. Now, as long as it's still biblically responsible, there's a possibility that it could sometime in the future meet the criteria to come back on the buy list. If that's the case, then it would be something that we would continue to follow for the partners. But I would suggest that you always follow the sell alerts. I wouldn't be too concerned that you're at 38% cash, even if it causes you to have more cash. If you follow those sell alerts, there are going to be things that are going to come onto the buy list that you will be able to reposition that cash.
Awesome. And the next one here, Shana, is Sherry. Sherry, I believe from your home state of Texas, wanted to let us know UT83 has not done a very good job down in Texas with the recent hurricane. Shared a link of a congressman talking about it. And her question is, how might this affect their stock? As a stock owner, what would be wise for us to do, or maybe to say something about it?
Yeah, I heard the same thing too. I heard that there were, workers that just refused to go to work because they wouldn't get paid a certain amount. There were issues with generators and all kind of things like that. But even though this was something very front and center, to your situation, if you lived in that area, the company is much larger than just the greater Houston area. So it doesn't really change our opinion on the company as a whole. But my other thought is, what do we really expect from a company that is micromanaged by the government? For the most part, the whole utilities sector is it's a very heavily government regulated industry, and we know what happens when government gets involved.
Yeah, well said, Shana. It might be the last one for today. Steven from Oklahoma is wondering about, the phrase keeping your powder dry. He says, I'm overweighted in fixed income and underweighted in cash. Can I call my overweight fixed income as cash as part of my dry powder, or should it be fixed income forever? He's in the 65 and still working as well.
If it's in the fixed income, it should stay fixed income. I just wouldn't let it concern you that one's overweighted and the cash is underweighted. I suspect if you're following the guidelines and recommendations that a good bit of your fixed income is actually CDs. And when those CDs come due sometime within the next 6 months, if you laddered them properly, they're going to become cash anyway. So I don't see any reason for alarm there.
Very good.
It's probably all we have time for today.
I think that
right?
is all we have time for, Shana. I know we got Twila coming up in the next segment, so that should be fun.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're on the phone app or you're on the website.
Yes,
because
there you go.
I don't know if we're going to cut the YouTube feed or not.
So long, YouTube.
Okay. So Twila's always has such great information. I hope that you'll stay tuned for that. If you listen on an outlet that carries the short version of the show, make sure that you have our phone app so that you can watch anytime it's convenient for you. For the rest of you, stay tuned. We'll be back.
It's easy to get caught up in the rush and forget about what really matters. Too often, we invest in stocks without knowing what they stand for. When your investments align with your values, your money speaks for you. Because biblical values matter, even when investing. Learn how to invest biblically and responsibly. Visit financialissues.org to learn more. That's financialissues.org.
Through the ministry of Preborn, the Financial Issues family has saved tens of thousands of lives of babies. What an amazing job that God has done through you, the Financial Issues family. Would you join us in saving the lives of babies? What an amazing reunion we will have in glory, meeting all the people that we have saved. Please go to preborn.org, that is preborn.org, or financialissues.org, and click on the Preborn banner.
Remember the good old days when companies stuck to just selling their products rather than using their profits to push an agenda? When you invest in a company, you become an owner of that company. And more businesses are now using your money to fund woke projects. We're called to be good stewards of all we have, and that includes ensuring your investments align with your biblical values. Thankfully, that's where Financial Issues can help. For over 25 years, Financial Issues has stood as a leader of biblically responsible investing, encouraging the body of Christ to keep funds out of companies that dishonor God. We provide Christian investors with the tools they need to build fiscally and biblically responsible portfolios. We're at the forefront of the fight, helping you not only with your finances, but advocating for truth and godly wisdom. For more information, go to financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
Well, this property was actually purchased by my great-grandfather, and we were able to come back to the farm a few years back to keep the family farm, hopefully, in the family.
Working together is a lot of fun sometimes and can be very challenging.
Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron.
We want to try to provide the freshest possible and healthiest possible produce for our neighbors and our friends and the people that we are able to touch in their lives at the farmers markets. Samaritan Ministries is a perfect fit because we feel like we can actually partner with other Christians to help them provide for their medical needs.
We're Tony and Ginger Malik, and we are Grandma and Grandpa's farm in Sparland, Illinois, and we are Samaritan Ministry members.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back, everybody. Glad to be here with you this morning. Hope that YouTube folks, you were able to flee the evil shackles of YouTube and come over and join us in free speech land on our website or on Rumble, any of the other outlets that we have as well. But good to see you all this morning, and thanks for joining us. As we said on the previous side of that break, got a special guest on with me here, Twila Brase. It's been a while since Twila has been on with us, and it's been an even longer time since I've gotten to talk to Twila on the air. So I am very excited for this interview, as I'm sure you all are as well. Twila, welcome back. It's great to have you back on with me.
Thank you so much. It's always good to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Twila, let's start. Just give us an update on how you and CCH Freedom have been doing since we last had you on. What have been some of your latest initiatives? I know that you have an event coming up soon. What can you tell us?
Yes, well, we have an event. It's called Physician on Fire, and it is Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, and she is the medical doctor who sued the FDA on its opposition to ivermectin. Mm-hmm. And she basically said, you guys are practicing medicine and you have no right to do so. And the courts agreed in March. And so she won. So she's been battling the bureaucrats. She's battling Walgreens, who refuses to dispense her ivermectin prescription still today without getting some rationale from her as a doctor as to why they should dispense it. So anyway, she's going to be our speaker, and we have, it is October 3rd, so Thursday, October 3rd in Bloomington, Minnesota, which is right next to our Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. And so if you want to come, if you're in the area and you want to come, it is just go to cchfreedom.org and sign up there, cchfreedom.org. I'll, of course, also be speaking, and we'll have a special surprise guest that we're not giving the name of. And so that's one of the big things that we've been doing. So that's October 3rd.
Awesome. Awesome. And that's exactly 4 weeks to the day from today, folks. So,
exactly.
Twila, when is the deadline for people to sign up?
Well, the deadline for early bird pricing is this Friday, September 6th, and I believe the deadline to sign up period is something like September 27th or 28th. That we always do take walk-ins, but it's not encouraged because you never know.
Sure. Yep.
Food, you want the food to be available, right?
Yeah, absolutely. CCHFreedom.org. CCHFreedom.org is where to go for that, folks. Twila, you'd also mentioned that you have a handbook coming out. Can you tell us about this handbook?
Yes, we have a Medicare handbook that we have been furiously writing, and we have finally finished all the text, and it is now into the designer. We expect that it will come out next month in October, right before Medicare open enrollment. And so, stay tuned. And it is not going to be like any other handbook you have ever seen, because we're going to talk about the 10 traps, Medicare traps that you should try to avoid. We're going to talk about timely decisions and why you should never miss a payment and all sorts of things that a lot of handbooks don't talk about.
Awesome, Twila. Thank you for that. And thank you for being on the front lines for all of us in each of those initiatives. That's great stuff there. Well, Twila, we have some unfortunate news we got to talk about today regarding physician care. There seems to be a growing number of physician assistants and nurses taking the place of doctors in patient care. Can you tell us a little bit about this and why this might be troubling?
I think that a lot of Americans really don't understand what's happening with the physician workforce, actually the entire healthcare workforce. Really, the government folks and the corporate entities, they're all using the healthcare system for their own purposes, and it's really driving a lot of the doctors and the nurses out of the practice. And so I think during COVID, there were 100,000 nurses that left the field, including young nurses. They're just sort of like, we're out of here. We're not going to be any part of this, right? And I believe by 2036, there's going to be a shortage of up to 80,000 physicians. And 2036 is when Medicare is currently estimated to be out of money, in other words, insolvent. And the only bills that will be paid will be as the money from workers comes in through the payroll tax. And so, we are really hitting a time in this country where a lot of Americans don't really realize this whole implosion that's taking place in the exam room, in Medicare, et cetera. And so one of the things that Obamacare did was it gave all of this money to educate nurse practitioners. So nurse practitioners who have only, maybe a little bit more training than I. I'm a registered nurse. I worked in the ER for 8.5 years, pediatric ER, best place in the world to work. So they're coming out of school because there are all these, some of them diploma mills where they're just, nurses or even non-nurses are getting educated and getting a nurse practitioner degree without a whole lot of clinical practice if they're not a nurse in the very beginning, because there are some of those, right? They're just going straight from whatever they do into nurse practitioner school without having been a nurse before. And so they are graduating, lots and lots of them. A lot of your listeners probably know them. They're wonderful people. But to understand what's really behind that is to really take over where doctors are leaving. Rather than encouraging physicians, who are the only ones in the entire country with a medical degree, with 20,000 hours or more of clinical practice or clinical training. They're the only ones that have that kind of expertise. And rather than trying to keep them in the field, they're trying to replace them with people that don't have even half the training. And PAs, physician assistants as well. And the interesting thing about physician assistants is that their national organization has changed their name to physician associates. And there's a lot of physicians who are very concerned about this, including the American Physician Association, American Medical Association, who is basically saying, these are still assistants, but they're calling themselves associates, and this may confuse the American patient as to whether they're a physician or not, right? So there's a whole lot of things happening. We have something called the Patient Toolbox at patienttoolbox.org. And if you look in any one of those boxes, like in the hospital or at the clinic, you can find a section, just click on it, it says credentials. Look at the training of all these different folks. And when you're in the exam room, go to patienttoolbox.org, click on credentials and see who's in the exam room with you and what their training is. I always encourage people to ask. If there's no title on them, if they don't say who they are, they don't say their name, they don't say their position, anything, ask them. Do not hesitate to ask them. Know who is in the exam room with you. And if you want a physician to give an opinion or look at you, ask for a physician.
That's awesome advice, Twila. A good reminder for us as we try to be good stewards of everything we have, including our health. Speaking of doctors, Twila, I've always been concerned a little bit about trying to find a good doctor, and it seems like that concern could be heightened as we're seeing more and more doctors leaving the practice here. How would you advise our listeners as we try to find these good doctors, doing our research, going to that link that you mentioned for sure, but finding the doctors who might not fall in lockstep with the establishment and simply try to truly help people? How would you help us?
Well, there are several ways, because you can always just Google something like independent doctor or private pay doctor or something like that and see who's in your neck of the woods. You can also go to our Wedge of Health Freedom at jointhewedge.com and see if you can find a physician in your area or a nurse practitioner. We have nurse practitioners as well. We have a few pharmacies, but somebody in your area that is working independently. Now, they may or may not subscribe to your worldview, but they have chosen to be independent and not let the government or the health plans control what they do. The other thing is you can look up direct primary care, DPC, direct primary care clinic, and see if there's someone in your area. Now, we are trying to get all the DPC clinics into the Wedge, and anybody who is a fee-for-service clinic who just has a list of services and they charge you and they tell you exactly what they're, that's a fee-for-service. And so we're trying to get them all in there so that everybody can find them. But as of this time, we know that we don't. And so when you want to find a physician, those are the ways to just go look and see if you can find one that's independent. When you go on their website, it should say that they don't take Medicare, they don't take Medicaid, they don't take insurance, and it's all about cash. So that's the way you know you've got someone who's independent and working only for you.
Absolutely. And just remind our listeners, Twila, where do they find the information about the Wedge? Is that on cchfreedom.org?
Well, they can find it there, but they can also go direct to jointhewedge.com, jointhewedge.com.
Jointhewedge.com, yep.
One thing I just want to say about doctors, and for everybody to try to help these independent doctors not only survive, but thrive. And there are surgical centers too. Try to figure out ways that you can actually use them, because this is where we as an organization want all of healthcare to go. We want real health insurance that pays you directly so you can use that money and pay your doctor and your hospital directly. We want cash-based hospitals that aren't under the thumb of anybody. And so this is the whole parallel system that we're moving toward, we're trying to make happen in this country, because we're not trying to reform the current healthcare system. This is unreformable, to put it that way. It can't be done. And so we really have to build the parallel system. And you have to understand as well that doctors come out with about $250,000 of loans.
Twila, we've run out of time here, as it always seems to happen, but man, I appreciate you so much coming on the program with us. Folks, remember to check out those links that Twila mentioned, jointhewedge.com, cchfreedom.org. As always, Twila, thank you for joining us, and thank you and CCH Freedom for standing in the fight for us and giving us the information that we need to know. We'll be right back, folks, after this break. Stick with us.
Are you a Christian seeking to align your investments with your faith? I'm Shana Burt, host of the program Financial Issues. During our program, we share valuable information about the financial issues of the day, including how markets and the economy are moving and how public companies are behaving, helping you to make wise decisions with your investments and the money that the Lord has blessed you with. Using biblical standards, we provide you with valuable financial insight based upon Scripture, making it easy for you to invest in a way that aligns with your values. I can assume that most of you have investments in a 401k or IRA, but what I am sure of is most of you have no clue that the companies in your mutual funds may be funding the LGBTQ agenda, pornography, abortion, the list goes on and on. By listening to Financial Issues, you will learn how to get rid of those investments that are dishonoring God.
Become a partner today by simply going to financialissues.org/join. Click the green button to become a partner today.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Hope you all enjoyed having Twila on there. I'm sorry we had to cut her off. We're up against that hard break there. But next time we have Twila on, we'll pick up on that conversation because we didn't get to everything that we wanted to talk about, and there's a lot more to do so. But great to see. I saw a couple of you in the chat, Royce in particular, saying that you actually found your family doctor through the Wedge. That is awesome, man. That's very cool. So make sure to check that out. Jointhewedge.com is that link that Twila had referenced. And then, of course, cchfreedom.org is the kind of the one-stop shop to go to get you to all those different places. But jointhewedge.com, particularly for those doctors on the Wedge there. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you all for your continued prayers for me and Megan. I don't think I shared this with you all yet, but we had our first appointment this past week for our third baby. Megan's just about to end the first trimester, and she's doing great, very healthy. We actually found someone who is a believer, a wonderful, wonderful gal. Is going to be Megan's midwife. So we're really pumped. But I wanted to share that good news with all of you, kind of as we're talking about some of that stuff, as we mentioned with Twila. All right, folks, we got the Ag Report here with Craig Haugaard. And then right after that, we'll get back to the markets and some of your comments. Here is Craig Haugaard with today's Ag Report.
The
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for September 5th. Corn is pushed higher as fund short covering outpaced farmer selling. While the Delta is pretty much wrapped up corn harvest, we should see the southern portion of the Corn Belt harvest pick up. And with an increased harvest pace, I would expect to see some selling pressure come back into this market. At yesterday's close, we had December corn 3.5 cents higher at $4.12 3/4. Soybeans benefited from declining crop conditions and a dry forecast that had funds covering their short position. The market was also supported by an analyst in Brazil who believes that Brazil will have the smallest percent increase in soybean acreage that they've seen in 18 years. As a result, November beans were 9.5 cents higher at $10.21.5. Wheat closed higher for the 7th consecutive session. This market may continue to rally, but we need to be aware that larger crops in Australia, Canada, and the U.S. may more than offset the reduced crops in the Black Sea region and Europe. At any rate, yesterday we had Minneapolis December wheat 16.25 cents higher at $6.23.5. Kansas City rose by 16.75 cents to close at $5.93 per bushel, and Chicago was 14 cents higher at $5.80 3/4. Cotton futures continue to slide sideways. At the closing bell, December futures were 69 points lower, settling at 69.81. Livestock futures also retreated. We had October live cattle and nickel lower at $179.22.5 per hundredweight. October feeder cattle dropped by $1.87.5 as they settled at $237.45 per hundred. And October lean hog futures were 95 cents lower, closing out the session at $81.57.5 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures got to within 1 cent of the contract high and then sold off fairly sharply. At the closing bell, October futures were down 25 points as they settle at $23 per hundredweight. Well, this has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
So, folks, take a look at the markets here after a bit of a rocky start to the historically most chaotic month of the trading calendar that September seems to be. Markets settled down a little bit yesterday. By midday, the major indices were moderately positive as investors seemed to settle a bit, but then later in the afternoon, they slipped under the flat line once again, and they ended mixed. The Dow was in the positive barely. The S&P was down about 1/8, and the NASDAQ down about 1/3. So the markets haven't quite settled themselves down yet from really a rocky start that we saw the month on Tuesday. Right now, as they've opened 20 minutes ago or so, the Dow is down 0.5%, the S&P 500 is up 0.1%, and the NASDAQ is up 1/5 as well. So that's what the markets are looking like this morning. Back to our topic of the day here, folks. We got a good question here from Daniel in the chat saying, I have 6 months in my emergency fund. Daniel, that is awesome. Very good. Right in the target of what Shana was talking about. His question is, how much cash should we keep at home? Daniel, the answer to that is it's really up to you. There's not a specific number that we would reference. I'm not going to say $5,000 or $500. And even percentages can get tricky as well, because really what you have to consider is, what am I going to use this cash for? This is different from your emergency fund. Your emergency fund, as Shana had mentioned, it's 3 to 12 months of living expenses. The emergency cash at home needs to be much smaller than that, because that is really for extreme emergencies. Like we talked about yesterday on the show, you're talking about Book of Revelation style things. Nuclear war, apocalyptic events. If the banks shut down and you need to get somewhere, you need to have enough cash to fill up your gas in your gas tank. You need to have enough cash to be able to use in the event if you need to buy food or something like that. Now, again, you've heard Dan in the past and Shana mention also that you might be better served having things to barter with at that time. But having some cash on hand would be good for you. So I have some as well, Daniel, that I keep in my house, and it's not much, but it's enough where I can comfortably say, okay, if I can't get any money out of my bank account, I can at least use this to fill up my gas tank if I need, for example. So I think that is kind of a good metric for you to use. There's not a specific number, not a specific percentage. Some people are a little more comfortable with more cash. Some are okay with a little less. So back to our topic of the day, the question, I had to spend my emergency fund. What do I do? I thought this was really interesting, and I want to give you a few things to consider kind of as we wrap up this conversation here that Shana had mentioned earlier in the show. The question I want to ask you folks is, what is the purpose of money? What is the purpose of money? And it's something we talk about a lot on the show, but I think one of the prime purposes of money is, in fact, very simple, that money is meant to be spent. Now, it's not meant to be spent frivolously and not foolishly, but money is meant to be spent. I mean, think about it. What else is money used for other than to buy things? You use money to pay your mortgage. You use money to buy food. Don't mistake this as a green light to spend whatever you want, but realize the purpose of money is to obtain things you need. What it all comes back to, in the final analysis, I work to get a paycheck so that my family can have a place to live. And so they can have food to eat and water to drink and clothes to wear. That's what it all comes back to. I'm telling you this to help you understand. Do not despair if you have to spend your emergency fund. That's what it's there for, right? That's what the fund is there for. I have an example I'll share with you. A couple months ago, we bought a trampoline for our kids, in quote, kind of also for me because it's just a lot of fun. Big trampoline, we put it in the backyard. We love it. Me, Eloise, and Josiah are out there literally almost every day. And several times a day as we go out there, I have to remind Josiah not to cannonball into the net on the trampoline. There's a safety net there. It's not very strong. It's strong enough to, protect a little kid maybe, but once you start smacking into it too much, it will eventually rip. I have to remind Josiah, hey, you can't do that to the net. But I also have to remind myself that that's what the net is there for. The net is there to protect the little ones. I shouldn't be cannonballing into it because I would probably break it, but he's small. It's okay to do. It's that same idea. Your emergency fund is a safety net. And if you have to spend it, it's a bummer to spend it, but that's what it's there for. So take a deep breath. Remember why you built it up in the first place for times like this. If you're in an emergency and you have to spend it, you can breathe a sigh of relief. That's what it's there for. That's the first thing to think about. Number two, in this situation, you have to prioritize what is most important. Remember, Shana said, I think it was in the second segment of our show today, don't stop investing even if you have to spend your emergency fund. And I agree with her completely. I think the reference that she gave was if you have like a 90%, 10%, saving to investing ratio, that's what you should be doing in your emergency situations. If it's not an emergency, maybe you flip that around and you spend a lot of time investing, a lot of money investing, not as much in your saving. You need to be wise though. Consider this, what the greatest need is at the moment. If you just spent down your emergency fund and your focus has been on this point, building up retirement for 20 years from now, it's not a bad thing to put a pause on that, at least on that concept. And again, I'm not contradicting what Shana said and stopping to invest. What I'm saying is pull back the intensity of it, put the intensity into the saving because that's what's most important right now. That's what's right in front of you. So your immediate needs come first. Redirect the large portion of your income to putting back into that emergency pool. And I'd encourage you not to let your eyes get bigger than your stomach. Don't think, you know what, I can build up my emergency savings and I can still invest with the same intensity. It's okay to pull back a little bit on the investing intensity if you are trying to build back up an emergency fund that's been depleted. You see what I mean? That's what's most important right now. Your retirement, your saving, your equity investing, that will still be there and that can resume with the same amount of intensity as soon as the emergency fund is built back up. Again, I'm not contradicting what she said. Still put a little bit there. But don't fret if it's only a little bit is really what I'm saying. And then lastly, I would encourage all of you, don't be afraid to ask for help. Speaking as a guy here, I don't like to do this. I like to figure things out on my own. There's probably men in our group and maybe women as well, but you're from an older generation where you just figured things out on your own. Sometimes in life, you're going to come into a situation where you're going to need help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Consider the things Shana mentioned with the family members for sure. I think that's really important, especially if family members are tricky. But don't let that deter you from asking, and don't let that deter you from remembering that this is where the church comes in to help. This is why you need a local church, folks. Ultimately, it's for your spiritual protection. But the local church can also come in and help in times like this where you need financial assistance. When you ask the Lord for help, folks, He very often provides through the generosity of His people. I've told this story before. When Eloise was born, we had a massive hospital bill. We didn't have Samaritan Ministries. We were on regular health care that cost way too much. And because of that, we had a massive hospital bill that we could not afford to pay. We had a family member who is a believer step in and say, I will pay this for you, no questions asked. And it was amazing. And so don't be afraid to ask for help. If you find yourself in that situation, the Lord is going to provide. So I hope that could be an encouragement for you folks. It was a great show. I hope you'll join us for Bible study tomorrow as well. Forgot to mention it. We'll be meeting tomorrow, 6:30 Eastern Time. Hope you'll join us then. Of course, Rapid Fire Friday comes after that. Shana will be back. Remember, it's all His. And let's be found good and faithful stewards with the money God has given to us. God bless you all. We'll see you tomorrow.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.